Today's lesson is going to cover Chapter 8, Key Issue 2, Why Are Nation-States Difficult to Create? This lecture will cover the first half of this key issue, and the second video will cover the second half. Between these two videos, we will discuss the development of states, nation-states and multinational states, Russia, which is the largest multi-ethnic state, nation-states in the former Soviet Union, and colonies. Let's talk about what a nation-state is. Remember, a state is synonymous with country. So a nation-state means we're talking about a country that's ethnicity corresponds with a sovereign territory. Keep in mind that a nation can exist that takes up a specific territory. But if that territory is not regarded as its own country, then it's not a nation state. For example, Scotland is considered a nation, but because it's part of the United Kingdom, it's not considered a nation state. France, on the other hand, would be considered a nation state, as the French that make up the nation also have sovereignty over the territory. Another example, which is quite complicated, is that of Israel. So Palestinians, even though they have distinctive Palestinian territory, would be regarded as a nation, but because their territory is not regarded as an independent country, it would not be considered a nation state. On the other hand, Israel would be considered a nation state because the ethnicity that makes it up is primarily Jewish. Israel is often referred to as a Jewish state. In order for a piece of territory to be regarded as a nation, even though it doesn't have sovereignty, it would still have to have a history in which the ethnic group that primarily makes up that territory has tried to fight for self-determination, meaning that they have sought or attempted to achieve nation-state status. Again, some examples would include Scotland, Palestine, and also Kurdistan. The Kurdish people, which make up the territory of Kurdistan, which is not recognized as an independent state, has territory in Syria, Iraq, Iran, and Turkey. The Kurds hope that sometime in the future, the territory that they make up may be considered a nation state and independent from territory that belongs to 4 of those countries. Let's spend some time talking a little bit about the history of states. Again, I cannot stress enough. Anytime I use the term state in human geography, I'm talking about a country. Now, the first states emerged in ancient times in Southwest Asia and North Africa, currently known as the region of the Middle East. During this time, territories weren't really regarded as states, but rather empires, kingdoms, or estates controlled by hereditary class or nobles. The concept of how we understand a state first developed in Europe. We will talk about ancient states in the Fertile Crescent city-states, medieval states with regard to European realms, and 20th century Europe, specifically with regard to boundaries matched to ethnicities. Take a look at Figure 8-7, located on page 270 of your textbook. This is the Fertile Crescent. This region was home to some of the earliest known city-states. The Fertile Crescent in Southwest Asia formed an arc between the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean Sea. It was situated at the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and Africa. The Fertile Crescent was the center for land and sea communication in ancient times. This crescent-shaped area of relatively fertile land was organized into a succession of empires starting several thousands of years ago. This area was also known as Mesopotamia, and it's where the first known city-states emerged. A city-state is a sovereign state that comprises a town and surrounding countryside. This was a time when walls were created to establish boundaries of the city, and outside the walls, the city controlled agricultural land to produce food for urban residents. The countryside also provided the city with an outer line of defense against attack by other city-states. Over time, one city or tribe in Mesopotamia would gain military dominance over the others and form an empire. As you probably learned in 7th grade, Mesopotamia is cradled between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, which makes this whole area very fertile. Hence, that's why it's called the Fertile Crescent. As you can also see, the Fertile Crescent is situated in present-day Iraq, but also encompasses territory in Lebanon, Israel, and Egypt. Let's move into the Roman Empire. This is figure 8-8, and it's located on page 271 of your textbook. This is the Roman Empire, and it represented a unified political body over many different ethnicities. This is the Roman Empire in 100 AD at its height. The Roman Empire controlled much of Europe and Southwest Asia, as well as North Africa. As you can see, the Roman Empire included modern-day Spain, Iran, Egypt, and England. At its maximum, the empire comprised 38 different provinces, each using the same set of laws that had been created in Rome. Massive walls were built by the Roman army as a way of defending from the empire's enemies. The Roman Empire collapsed in the 15th century due to attacks as well as internal disputes. In the European portion of the Roman Empire, it was fragmented into different estates, and those estates were run by monarchs, dukes, barons, and other nobles. After the fall of the Roman Empire, Europe had many small political units. Take a look at figure 8-9, located on page 271 of your textbook. Now compare the last map to this map, figure 8-10, also located on page 271 of your textbook. The smaller political units became part of larger empires by 1800. Many of the small states ended up being consolidated and were unified under the control of a monarch or an emperor. And this formed the basis for the development of modern states that we know of today, like France and Spain. Here's figure 8-11, also located on the same page of your textbook. After World War I, the victors redrew boundaries on the basis of language. Because of this, much of Europe was organized into nation-states. Into the 20th century, most of Europe's territory was ruled by just a handful of emperors, kings, and queens. After World War I, several leaders of the victorious countries met at the Versailles Peace Conference to redraw the map of Europe. Former President Woodrow Wilson helped play a major role in the decisions that divided Europe into these nation states. The major goal of the Allied leaders was to divide Europe into a collection of nation states. They used language as the principal criteria for identifying ethnic groups. New states were created, and the boundaries of existing states were adjusted to conform as closely as possible to the territory occupied by the speakers of different languages. This undertaking created some clear-cut examples of nation-states, but many of the states created a century ago in Europe have not survived as nation-states today. This is evident when bumping up this map to a current map of Europe today. In the next section of Key Issue 2, we're going to be looking at nation states and multinational states. So I already mentioned self-determination, which is the right for an ethnicity to govern itself. A multi-ethnic state, more than one ethnicity shared nationally, and a multinational state, more than one ethnicity with histories of self-determination. Let's look at Figure 8-12, located on page 272 of your textbook. Ethnic diversity by state varies throughout the world, with Africa having the most ethnically diverse states. As you can see, the greenest areas of this map are going to be the most diverse, and the more orange they get, the least diverse. States with the least diversity would be the best examples of nation states, and 11 of the 18 states with the least ethnic diversity happen to be in Europe. In contrast, 18 of the world's 20 most diverse states are in Africa. A state that contains more than one ethnicity is known as a multi-ethnic state, but no state has a population that is 100% a single ethnicity. Every state in the world, to a varying degree, is multi-ethnic. A multinational state is a state that contains more than one ethnicity with traditions of self-determination and self-government. If you were trying to explain the distinction between a multi-ethnic state and a multinational state, remember the multi-ethnic state is just going to demonstrate that different ethnic groups make up that country. But a multinational state is going to be made up of different nations, of ethnicities in which those ethnic groups have historically tried to create their own territories and their own countries. In some multinational states, ethnicities can coexist peacefully while remaining culturally distinct. Each ethnic group recognizes and respects the distinctive traditions of the other ethnicities. In some peaceful multinational states, each ethnic group may control governmental functions in the region of the country it inhabits. In other cases, however, ethnicities all contribute cultural features to the formation of a single nationality. This is where it gets complicated. For example, the United States has numerous ethnic groups, all of which consider themselves to belong to a single U.S. nationality. Let's look at our last image here. This is figure 8-13, and it's Europe in 1980. This figure can be found on page 273 of your textbook. As you'll see here, Germany was divided into two states after its defeat in World War II. During the 1930s, German National Socialists, also known as the Nazis, claimed that all German-speaking parts of Europe constituted one nationality and should be unified into one state. After years of the Nazis being able to expand into Central Europe, the UK and France declared war when the Nazis invaded Poland, which was not a German-speaking country. Following its defeat in World War II, Germany was divided into two states. Two Germanys existed from 1949 to 1990. The present-day state of Germany bears little resemblance to the territory that was occupied by German-speaking people prior to these uprisings of the 20th century. After the breakup of the Soviet Union and the fall of communism, Germany became unified and the two divided regions became one. Now, it is important to note that the attempt after World War I to divide Europe into nation states was not a recipe for peace. Eventually, the multinational states of Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, and the Soviet Union were broken up into multiple states. In 1993, Czechoslovakia became the Czech Republic and Slovakia, two separate states. In Yugoslavia, the breakup included a peaceful conversion of Slovenia in 1991 from a republic in multinational Yugoslavia to a nation-state. However, as you learned in Chapter 7, other portions of the former Yugoslavia became nation-states only after ethnic cleansing and other atrocities occurred. This is the end of Chapter 8, Key Issue 2, Part 1.